Hi there, I hope you're doing well. Today I'm going to be trying out a brand new medium, markers. Everybody seems to love markers and I didn't want to splurge on a big set, so I got this pack from Monami. I've got 6 colours, they're all kind of reds and pinks, but I absolutely love the theme, so I'm going to try and create something for the very first time with markers. Just as I got all of my kit out, I realised that these were not alcohol markers. I genuinely thought I'd picked out a set of alcohol markers, but no, it turns out these Monami markers are water-based. I looked online to try and find a video of these Monami markers and I could not find anything on Monami. I think it's just one of those brands that are kind of on Shein and Temu. And then I tried to look up water-based markers to see how to use them, and they are used so differently to alcohol-based markers. You use them a little bit more like watercolour and actually have a paintbrush and add water to them. So I was just testing this out a little bit and I did a colour chart first because I always do a colour chart to see if any of the colours could actually be blended together to create new colours. I did some little tests as well, adding water and trying some different techniques. There weren't many blending capabilities, I'm not gonna lie, so I went straight in to do this portrait and honestly this was an absolute struggle. These Monami markers are currently on Stationery Pal for £4 for 6 markers, so I still think that's a good price, but I think they're probably a little bit cheaper because they're water-based. There is very little information out there for water-based markers, everything is alcohol, so a lot of this I had to kind of wing and try and figure out as I went. I believe the main gist of it is that these markers should be treated more like a watercolour than alcohol markers. I'm glad I went in with the colour chart first and tried to get a feel for the pens. I'm also glad I did a couple of my tests where I added water and tried to blend it or just add water to try and remove the colours. I think these were really helpful. I also tried using a spray bottle to see if that would disperse or do anything, and it just kind of created a mess. For the first layer, all I wanted to do was use the light pink marker to pop down the outline for the person and then blend it with a paintbrush, and this was so much harder than I thought it would be. It seems like some shades blend a lot easier than others, which is a really crazy find, if I'm honest. I did not expect it at all. The darker shades blended a lot easier than the lighter shades, which had virtually no blending capabilities at all, which was really difficult when it came to the portrait because I decided to do the lighter shades and then blend them out with the water, but I feel like it possibly would have blended better if I'd have just covered the entire face with a darker shade. The problem is that is quite a risk because it might not have actually blended when I then added the water, or maybe too much time would have passed and it wouldn't have blended very well, or I might not have been able to add the highlights. So I do think doing a portrait was such a difficult thing for this experiment. So I popped down the marker and tried to blend it, and you can see it is so patchy on the skin tone. I possibly should have started with the hair or something first. I also found out that the water and the paintbrush needs to be added like instantly. If you leave it 20 seconds to move on to something else or to continue your line work, it will be too dry to actually smudge and blend the colour out, and then you're left with just thick lines. I don't think this was the case with my Tombow markers, so that's just an interesting thing I noted with these markers. One thing I really missed with these markers is having a brush tip. They come with a bullet and a chisel tip, and I do not like chisel tips. I do not like highlighters. It's one of the things I didn't like about the mild liners. I love brush tips. Brush tips are my absolute favourite. The lines probably would have been less harsh if there was a brush tip, and I think it possibly would have blended better if there was a brush tip. And I do think the Tombows are probably more water-based than these markers. From what it seems, these markers are very pigmented and they just don't blend very easily when water is added. There's a lot of pigment and they do go very bright, but blending is so difficult. There also isn't much of a flow to the pens, not like with Tombows. But Tombos are about £3 each, so that's something to consider too. And I don't think using it for a portrait like this was a great idea because it was so hard. But then again, if I had tried to use the chisel tip and just pop down loads and loads of colour, I don't think I would have been able to blend it either that way, and that could have been an absolute mess. So the route that I took was just adding a bit of line work and then trying to blend it with the brush. The actual face doesn't have very much marker on. I think it just would have been a risk if I was going to use a dark shade, do a dark skin tone. It would have been a big risk because I'd have to make sure that the paintbrush actually worked and that highlights could still be added somehow. Obviously, I didn't know these markers were going to be water-based, so I don't think there's any way to compare them to alcohol markers because they are just so different. I don't know if I would like alcohol markers because these are just so different to them. It's not any easier for me to be able to tell. As far as the markers go, they have a lot of pigment, not a ton of flow, and they don't blend very easily. Well, the darker shades do. 6 markers for £4. When you compare that to Tombow, and they're about £3 each on Jackson's, you can get them slightly cheaper if you get a set. I just wish these would have a brush tip. If these pens had a big brush tip like the Tombows, they would be virtually on par. They would be as good as the Tombows but significantly cheaper. Unfortunately, because they are a chisel tip, it's really hard to compare the two. But honestly, these markers have so much colour and pigment. They're not dry in the slightest, so they have so much potential. I don't think the markers are best used creating a piece like this. They're probably best used as a mixed media, and I also think they are best used for line work because the blending is not it. I really love what I was able to do with the flowers here, and I think that leans into what these markers would be best used as, the line work and then slightly blended out. I think the biggest perk of water-based markers is still the fact that they don't bleed through the page. That is one of the biggest cons with alcohol-based markers, and if you can figure out how to get it to work for you, that is such a positive. If you're already placing an order with Stationery Pal, I think these are 100% worth putting in your basket and seeing if you like them, if you can make them work for you. I do actually have a coupon code, which I'll leave on the screen now. I'm not very wasteful and I do still want to get the use out of these markers, so I personally think the best use for me is to use them sketching in a cafe, drawing figures, people, outfit ideas, or urban sketching outside and drawing architecture and buildings. You only really need one marker and a water brush, and you can just do line work and smudge it instantly. You can hold 2 in one hand. I tried this concept in my longest day of the year video, which I'll leave on screen and down below, and it worked so well. I definitely want to use them again. These are the Monami markers from Stationery Pal. If you've enjoyed watching me kind of struggle, then leave a like. Let me know in the comments if there's any other mediums you'd like to see me use. I really hope you've enjoyed this video, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.